February 24, 1991. The sun barely rises over the endless desert expanse of southern Iraq. The air is dry, shimmering with heat even in the early morning hours, and a faint smell of sand and diesel lingers over the tank column snaking across the flat horizon. Inside a T-72 tank, Sergeant Ivan Petrov grips the worn controls, sweat beading under his helmet. The radio crackles faintly, a thin lifeline of commands from battalion headquarters. Around him, the other Soviet-designed tanks, T-72s, T-62s, and T-55s, rumble like steel beasts, their treads grinding over hard-packed sand. Petrov's commander, Lieutenant Mikhail Sokolov, peers through the periscope, scanning the horizon for the faintest sign of the enemy. The desert seems empty, silent, almost deceptively calm. Soldiers exchange nervous glances. Some fidget with their gear, others stare blankly at the horizon, imagining the enemy before it even appears. Suddenly, a distant roar breaks the monotony, a metallic whine that grows louder with every second. Petrov's heart skips. The other crews look up. There, slicing through the clear blue sky, a small, almost unremarkable plane appears. At first glance, it seems harmless, almost comical in size compared to the hulking tanks below. But then, the unmistakable shape of its nose-mounted cannon catches Sokolov's eye, and the first seed of terror is planted. This is no ordinary aircraft. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, nicknamed the Warthog, is descending low and fast, its engines roaring like angry beasts. Mounted on its nose is the GAU-8 Avenger, a 7-barrel 30mm cannon capable of firing depleted uranium rounds at a blistering 3,900 rounds per minute. To these crews, trained to fear nothing, the Warthog is an apparition from a nightmare. The first round impacts the desert ahead of Petrov's tank with a thunderous crack, sending up a geyser of sand and rock. The T-72 shakes violently. Dust clouds swirl, blinding the crew. Then the next round hits, and the metal of the hull begins to scream under the force. Petrov grabs his radio. Contact. Air contact. But his words are cut short by another salvo, tearing through the side armor like paper. The tank groans, the world inside vibrating, the smell of hot metal and fuel suddenly overwhelming. For the Soviet tankers, trained for armored duels and artillery bombardments, this is something entirely different. This is precision death from the air, something they cannot outrun or hide from. The Warthog banks and circles back, and in seconds, tanks that seemed invincible moments ago are shredded, their crews trapped inside, stunned, fumbling, praying. In the cockpit of his tank, Petrov's hands shake. He watches as comrades are torn apart by a machine that seems more demon than plane. Lieutenant Sokolov shouts orders, but they are futile against the firepower descending from above. The desert, once a silent and empty expanse, now echoes with the screams of twisted metal and the frantic panic of men who realize that their armor, their skill, their bravery, means nothing against the flying Avenger. The air is thick with smoke and burning fuel. Every second stretches into eternity. Petrov glances up, eyes wide. The Warthog is gone, for now, leaving behind nothing but the wreckage of steel and shattered confidence. But the fear, the horror, lingers. They have seen the future of warfare, and it is merciless. The desert sun climbs higher, casting harsh shadows across the shattered battlefield. Smoke curls from the twisted wrecks of T-72s and T-62s, black against the golden sand. Sergeant Petrov's tank lurches forward, treads digging desperately into the sand as he tries to escape the invisible predator above. His hands are slick with sweat, fingers trembling on the controls. Every instinct screams at him to move faster, but the A-10 is already back, roaring overhead like a vengeful spirit. From above, the GAU-8 Avenger cannon begins its deadly dance again. The Warthog dives low, just meters above the desert floor, a streak of gray steel and fire. Each 30mm round rips through armor with terrifying precision. The tanks that attempt to scatter are cut down almost immediately. Ammunition racks ignite, turret hatches burst from the force. Crews scramble inside, clutching at radios and gear, praying for a miracle. But no miracle comes. The Avenger knows no mercy. Lieutenant Sokolov yells orders, trying to regroup what's left of his unit. Form a defensive line. Return fire. The tanks fire their 125mm cannons blindly into the sky, tracer rounds sparking uselessly against the speed and maneuverability of the A-10. Petrov watches in disbelief as his rounds miss by meters. The plane swerves effortlessly, a predator teasing its prey. The fear is palpable. Every tanker knows that at any moment, their own tank could be reduced to scrap metal. Around them, the battlefield has transformed into a chaotic tableau of destruction. One tank explodes, hurling flames and metal into the air. Another tilts onto its side, tracks shredded, turret jammed. The screams of the crews are drowned out by the roar of the Avenger cannon, each volley echoing like judgment from the skies. Petrov's ears ring, his stomach churns. He glances at Sokolov, whose eyes are wide with the same horror. Neither man speaks, words would be useless here. Survival depends on instinct. Some tankers try desperate maneuvers, zigzagging, burrowing into shallow dunes, using terrain for cover, but the A-10 anticipates every move. Its cannon rattles like a machine from another world, shredding armor and scattering metal fragments across the sand. Each pass leaves more destruction in its wake. The Avenger is not just a weapon, it is a statement, a declaration that the era of unstoppable Soviet armor has ended. As Petrov's tank jerks violently from a near miss, he realizes something chilling: the Avenger isn't firing at random. It targets weak points, turret joints, ammunition stores, fuel tanks. The precision is almost surgical, a terrifying combination of engineering and lethal strategy. The desert, once a stage for tank battles, has become a hunting ground. Every moment is a gamble between life and death. The Warthog pulls up, disappearing briefly behind a ridge. Silence falls, but it's a false calm. Petrov knows it will return. Sweat stings his eyes, he wipes it away with a trembling hand. Around him, the surviving crews exchange glances, faces pale under their helmets. Fear has replaced the confidence they trained for. For the first time, they feel utterly vulnerable, powerless against the flying instrument of destruction above. Petrov whispers under his breath, almost a prayer, "God help us," and in that moment, high above, the A-10 returns, its cannon spinning, ready to unleash the Avenger once more. The nightmare is far from over. The A-10 roars back into view, wings barely skimming the heat waves rising off the desert. Its engines scream like a predator closing in for the kill. Petrov's tank shudders as the first rounds strike the sand mere meters ahead, sending geysers of rock and metal into the air. Around him, the remaining tanks attempt to maneuver, but every move is anticipated, every retreat cut off by the relentless precision of the GAU-8 Avenger cannon. Inside his tank, Petrov feels the vibrations travel through every metal plate, rattling his teeth. He watches a nearby T-72 explode in a ball of flame, crew trapped inside with no chance of escape. The roar of the A-10 is deafening, but it is not just sound, it is a psychological weapon. Each pass reinforces the impossibility of resistance. Armor, once a source of pride and security, crumples under a hailstorm of 30mm rounds. These tanks, symbols of Soviet military might, are reduced to paper targets under the thunderous barrage. Lieutenant Sokolov's voice cracks over the radio as he tries to coordinate a response. Scatter. Break formation. Take cover. But the desert is merciless. Dunes provide little protection, and sand offers no shield against rounds that penetrate nearly every inch of tank armor. Petrov can see the expressions of his fellow tankers, wide eyes, jaws clenched, hands trembling. They are not just fighting a machine, they are confronting a horror engineered for one purpose: annihilation. Petrov fires his coaxial machine gun at the sky, tracer rounds arcing uselessly above, a tiny gesture of defiance. Another tank is hit, the turret is ripped from its base, metal twisting and collapsing. The smell of burning fuel fills the air, acrid and suffocating. Dust and debris swirl around him like a desert storm of death. Every second stretches into eternity, every heartbeat a reminder of how fragile human life is against the Avenger's relentless power. Some crews attempt to fire anti-aircraft missiles, desperate for a chance to strike the Warthog, but the A-10's speed and agility render them ineffective. Its pilot, calm and precise, weaves through tracer fire, calculating every angle, every weak point. The GAU-8 cannon spins, spitting death in controlled bursts, tearing through the tanks like they were toys. For Soviet tankers, this is not combat, it is an execution. Petrov's own tank takes a direct hit in the rear armor. Metal screams, circuits spark. He grips the controls tighter, heart pounding, praying the fuel tank holds. Through the periscope, he sees the Warthog bank for another pass. It's close, terrifyingly close, a flying demon with a singular goal. The roar of the cannon shakes the interior, dust clouds fill the turret. Every instinct screams at him to survive, to move, to hide, but there is nowhere to go. For the first time, Petrov understands what the desert has become, a graveyard for Soviet armor, a place where tanks meant to dominate the battlefield are rendered powerless. The Avenger doesn't just destroy machines, it destroys confidence, morale, the very belief that these tankers could survive against the skies. Fear is absolute. The Warthog swoops down again, engine screaming like a beast unleashed. Petrov's tank lurches as another salvo slams into the sand mere feet away, showering the turret with jagged metal fragments. The vibration rattles his bones, the smell of scorched steel and burning electronics fills the air. Across the desert, what remains of his unit is a chaotic tableau, burning hulks of T-72s, smoke spiraling into the sky, and panicked crews scrambling for cover wherever they can find it. Lieutenant Sokolov shouts over the radio, voice trembling but commanding, "Form a perimeter. Keep moving. We must survive." But survival seems an impossible concept. The A-10 doesn't just attack, it anticipates, predicts, and strikes with terrifying precision. Every maneuver the tankers attempt is already accounted for. Each blast of the GAU-8 cannon tears through steel as though it were paper, ripping apart turrets, ammunition compartments, and tracks. Inside his tank, Petrov struggles to steady his breathing. Sweat stings his eyes, his fingers are cramped from gripping the controls so tightly. He watches another tank, one he had trained alongside for months, explode in a shower of fire. Crew members are thrown from their hatches as twisted metal collapses around them. The desert, once an expanse of strategic advantage for armored units, has become a death trap where human skill and courage mean nothing. The psychological toll is immense. Tankers whisper prayers, exchange terrified glances, or freeze entirely, unable to act. The sheer terror of the Warthog and its Avenger cannon has reduced seasoned soldiers to helpless observers of their own destruction. Every roar from above, every flash of muzzle fire, reminds them that their armor, once thought invincible, is now fragile, almost ceremonial. Petrov's eyes catch movement on the horizon, another A-10 appears, already locked onto a damaged T-62. Its pilot releases a controlled burst from the GAU-8, and the tank erupts in fire and metal. Dust and sand explode into the air, a deadly fountain marking the death of yet another armored giant. Around him, surviving crews are forced to retreat, abandon formation, and scatter aimlessly across the dunes. Strategy has become secondary to survival. For the Soviet tankers, this is the ultimate betrayal of everything they trained for. They are masters of armored warfare, skilled in maneuver, coordination, and firepower, but none of it matters when the enemy hovers above with a weapon designed for one purpose, to shred their tanks and their confidence alike. The roar of the GAU-8 has become more than a sound, it is a herald of doom, an omnipresent reminder that the rules of warfare have changed forever. Petrov grips the hatch as a round impacts the ground inches from his treads. The explosion throws him forward, his helmet hitting the metal with a sickening clang. Dust fills the compartment, burning his lungs. Through the haze, he sees Sokolov's tank rolling erratically, smoke trailing behind it. Both men know instinctively, if they cannot find cover soon, they will join the burning hulks littering the desert. Fear has become tangible. Every move, every decision is dictated by the Warthog's presence. For these tank crews, horror is no longer abstract, it is real, immediate, and unavoidable. And above them, the A-10 waits, the GAU-8 Avenger cannon ready to claim its next target. The sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the desert, a jagged landscape of twisted metal, smoking wrecks, and the remnants of once proud Soviet armor. Sergeant Petrov sits inside his battered T-72, the tank's exterior scarred with gouges and pockmarks from near misses. The roar of the A-10 has faded for the moment, but its presence lingers, like a shadow that refuses to leave. Around him, the battlefield tells a story of utter devastation. Tanks that had rolled across European plains in previous decades, feared for their firepower and resilience, now lie shattered and smoldering. Tracks are ripped off, turrets twisted, hulls penetrated as if they were made of cardboard. Crumpled armor and burnt debris mark the precise work of the Avenger cannon, which left nothing to chance. The surviving crews crawl from their tanks, faces pale, uniforms scorched and covered in sand. Petrov's hands tremble as he helps a fellow tanker from a burning turret. Words are unnecessary, fear and disbelief are written plainly on every face. They had expected combat, artillery barrages, perhaps mines or ambushes, but nothing had prepared them for the terror of a Warthog overhead. Lieutenant Sokolov surveys the scene, voice quiet, almost inaudible over the crackling of distant fires. This is not a battlefield anymore, he mutters. His gaze lingers on the horizon, half expecting the A-10 to return and resume its deadly hunt. What had once been a display of armored strength has been reduced to scattered survivors, a testament to the new face of modern warfare. In the fading light, Petrov walks among the wreckage, noting the precision with which each tank was destroyed. It is chilling. The Avenger cannon had not wasted a single shot. Ammunition stores had been ignited, fuel tanks ruptured, and armor penetrated with terrifying accuracy. The desert, a natural refuge for tank formations, had offered no protection. The Soviet crews had learned, in the harshest way possible, that their machines were no match for the speed, firepower, and surgical precision of the A-10 Warthog. For many of the tankers, the psychological impact is as severe as the physical destruction. Training, confidence, pride, all shattered under the relentless thunder of the GAU-8. Stories of that day would be whispered in mess halls and barracks for years to come. The legend of the Avenger cannon, the flying tank killer, would grow, a symbol of technological supremacy and the vulnerability of even the most feared armored forces. As night falls over the desert, Petrov and the few surviving crews gather near what remains of their command tank. Silence hangs heavily in the air, punctuated only by the distant hiss of smoldering wrecks. They exchange few words, no words could capture the horror of what they had witnessed. Above them, the stars appear indifferent to the carnage below. For the Soviet tankers, the lesson is clear, the battlefield has changed. Machines that once inspired fear now inspire dread. And somewhere in the skies above, the A-10 Warthog waits, the Avenger cannon ready to strike again, a relentless reminder that in modern warfare, no armor is truly invincible. The desert night settles in, cold and quiet, broken only by the distant hiss of fires and the groans of damaged machinery. Sergeant Petrov leans against the side of his tank, helmet in his hands, staring at the smoldering horizon. Around him, survivors move silently, helping one another, eyes hollow from the shock of what they've just endured. Every face carries the same unspoken truth: they have witnessed the end of an era. In the coming hours, reports will circulate, relayed back to Soviet commanders in disbelief. Tanks that were supposed to dominate the battlefield, the pride of Soviet armored forces, destroyed by a single aircraft and its monstrous cannon. Engineers and strategists will pore over the wreckage, studying the Avenger's effect, trying to understand how armor that once shrugged off artillery and anti-tank fire could be so effortlessly shredded. But Petrov and his comrades already know the truth: they were helpless, outmatched, and utterly exposed. For the A-10 pilots, it had been just another mission, another target set in a desert landscape. Yet for the tank crews below, it was a harrowing lesson in vulnerability, technology, and the evolution of combat. The roar of the GAU-8 Avenger had rewritten the rules of war, making clear that low-flying precision and overwhelming firepower could render even the most formidable armored units powerless. Weeks after that fateful encounter, Sergeant Petrov sits in a makeshift barracks, the desert wind whistling through cracked windows. He traces the scars on his hands, remnants of a tank hatch jammed by debris, and remembers the deafening roar of the GAU-8 Avenger, the shaking metal, the fire and smoke. Around him, surviving tankers speak in hushed tones, their voices carrying the weight of disbelief and lingering terror. Military analysts will later dissect the battle, studying the Warthog's tactics, the Avenger cannon's precision, and the vulnerabilities it exploited in Soviet armor. But for Petrov, Sokolov, and the other crews, the lessons are already carved into memory, not in reports or diagrams, but in the fear, chaos, and helplessness they experienced firsthand. Every T-72 destroyed, every turret twisted, every hatch scorched becomes a symbol of a changed battlefield, a reminder that technology could render once proud tanks impotent. Petrov recalls the first moment he saw the Warthog, its low-slung wings, the roaring engine, the spinning cannon that seemed unstoppable. The A-10 did not just kill tanks, it killed the illusion of invulnerability. The battlefield had evolved, and so too had the rules of survival. Anti-air measures, tactical dispersion, and new strategies would have to replace brute force and confidence in armor alone. Sokolov enters the room, carrying a worn helmet and a notebook full of observations. "We have to remember this," he says quietly, eyes scanning the group of young tankers listening intently. "Not just the destruction, but the lesson. Tanks alone are no longer enough. We must adapt, or this could happen again." Outside, the desert stretches endlessly, now quiet and deceptive in its calm. But in the minds of these soldiers, the image of the A-10 Warthog remains vivid, the flying demon that shredded armor and courage alike. It is a memory that will define their careers, shape doctrine, and serve as a warning to all armored forces: the age of invincible tanks is over. Petrov leans back, letting the memories wash over him. He closes his eyes, hearing again the roar, feeling the shake of the hull, smelling the acrid smoke. Horror, awe, and respect intertwine. The Avenger cannon, with its terrifying precision and devastating power, has rewritten what it means to be a tanker in modern warfare. And for those who survived, that day in the desert is more than history, it is a lesson etched forever in steel, sand, and memory. The sun sets fully over the desert, painting the horizon in deep reds and golds. The wreckage of tanks, once proud symbols of Soviet strength, now lies silent, smoldering reminders of a battlefield transformed. Sergeant Petrov walks among the remnants, the heat of the day giving way to a cold, creeping night. The silence is almost unbearable, broken only by distant gusts of wind stirring sand over shattered metal. Petrov pauses at the wreck of his own T-72, its turret twisted and scorched, tracks ripped apart. He remembers every second, the thunder of the GAU-8, the spray of sand and shrapnel, the screams of men trapped inside. This battlefield is a graveyard, and the lesson it delivers is clear: the rules of warfare have irrevocably changed. Tanks, no matter how well built, no longer guarantee survival against the skies. Lieutenant Sokolov joins him quietly, surveying the scene. "We survived," he murmurs, voice heavy with exhaustion. "But others did not. We've learned a price that cannot be measured in medals or reports." Around them, the remaining tankers gather their belongings, silent, somber, haunted by the memory of fire raining from above. High above, the stars begin to pierce the twilight, indifferent witnesses to the carnage below. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the roar of A-10 engines fades into memory, the GAU-8 Avenger cannon now legendary for the destruction it unleashed. For Soviet tankers, the horror they faced is unforgettable, a stark reminder that in modern warfare, fear and firepower can come from the skies, swift and absolute. As Petrov walks away, he casts one last glance at the twisted steel of what were once the most feared tanks in the world. The desert has swallowed their pride, leaving behind nothing but ash, sand, and lessons that will shape the armored battlefield forever. The Warthog, the Avenger, and the memory of that day remain etched in his mind, a permanent mark of how one weapon, one aircraft, changed the course of armored warfare forever.